Welcome to my YouTube Niev Story channel. Our story officially begins. I hope you like it. Parents pretend to be poor and refuse to pay for my living expenses and tuition, leaving me, a graduate student, without financial support. My younger brother, who is about to come of age, shows off on social media that his coming of age gift will be a riverside flat. I remain unmoved, only because the pauper system has formed a contract with me. Don't they understand that wealth has a magnetic field, and money always flows to those who are rich? Have they never considered that pretending to be poor for a long time may become a reality? Looking at the 2-digit balance left, I finally made up my mind to send a WeChat message to my father. After carefully deleting and modifying it several times, I clicked to send. Dad, I have been very busy with my project recently. Can you transfer 200 yuan to me? I will find a part-time job when I'm free, thank you Dad. Anxiously holding the phone, I didn't get the living expenses I wanted. The chat box at the top shows that the other party is typing. A voice message of more than 50 seconds is full of shirking and scolding me. The family has always been in a negative income. You are so big, can't you understand the family? I said early that you should not read that broken graduate student. What's the use of the degree in the end? Don't you still have to get married and be a wife and mother? I tell the truth, the family can't afford your noble graduate student now. No reading rich life, but still want to learn others to climb high. I even want 200 yuan for emergency. Can it be considered unreasonable? My phone vibrated again, and I looked down. It was a message from my mother. Near, Dad's temper is a bit explosive, but the family really has no money. Don't be angry with him, understand the family more. You still have subsidies and scholarships. The family hasn't had meat for more than half a month. Even when buying cabbage, it is to pick up the discarded vegetables from others to buy cheap. I sneered. Subsidies and scholarships? After paying the tuition, how much can be left for living expenses? Since a year ago, my father has never given me a penny. Tuition, I used subsidies and scholarships to pay for it, and living expenses, I earned it by working hard. Dad and Mom are playing red and white faces respectively. One suppresses me, scolds me, and despises that girls' reading is useless, and the other tells me every day about how difficult the family conditions are. I don't seem to be studying outside, but I seem to have a bad addiction that is unforgivable. The words are all forcing me not to continue reading. But there is only 1 year to graduate. How can I fail? I can only endure, and it will be good. The family's difficult conditions cannot support me. I will bite my teeth and fight for a breath. I plan to continue to check the materials, and my phone vibrates again. It's a message from a high school friend. The scorching heat, just a glance made me fall into the ice cave. So the right time of birth is the king. I remember when we just finished the college entrance examination, we wanted to go to the amusement park together, and buying a ticket for 100 yuan was a sin. Your brother this year after the college entrance examination, he went to the southern hemisphere to be unrestrained. The screenshot is the circle of friends sent by my brother. A close photo with kangaroos, a handsome selfie in front of the Sydney Opera House. The location is inevitably open. It is indeed in the southern hemisphere. My lips trembled slightly, and my hand holding the phone also trembled slightly. Oh, it turns out that the one who is extravagant is not me. I can't tell what kind of mood I was at that moment. It's just like the soul leaving the body, letting me look back at my ignorant and dull past in a third person. I remember the old thing my friend just mentioned. That afternoon when I received the admission notice. I was holding the admission notice of 985, feeling proud and confident that my future would be as bright as the sunny afternoon. But I didn't expect to encounter my first setback that afternoon. Dad, I want to go to Happy Valley with Xiaoqi. He put down his phone, frowned at me, and looked at me to make me doubt whether I said something wrong. Then he said, "You are an adult, can you be sensible? Spend 100 yuan to queue up, is it sick?" So that afternoon, I sat foolishly in the free park for half a day. The next day, I went to find a part-time job to start working. Now, something strange happened. Just a dozen days ago, I was still struggling to study how to fill in the volunteer form for my brother who scored just over 200 points, and he was crying hoarsely on the phone, repeatedly making lofty ambitions to my parents, saying how he would reform and stand out. Now, he is on the other side of the planet, using the copywriting that the brave enjoy the world first, and smiling brilliantly in the 9 palaces. At that moment, I thought a lot. Thinking about the rough steamed buns that are hard to swallow with pickles. Thinking about the quarrels and forbearance with the difficult employer for the class fee. Thinking about the lemons that were smashed in the milk tea shop until the palm of my hand was peeling, and I was physically nauseous when I smelled the lemon flavor for a while. Just because my parents said that the family income was negative growth. I believed it obediently and swallowed all the grievances and pain. Now, my brother's location has shattered their false pretense. The outfit on him can provide me with 2 months of living expenses. I took a few deep breaths and opened my brother's circle of friends with trembling fingers. It's still the declaration he posted a dozen days ago. It's good, I still know how to block me. Unfortunately, there is a flaw in the plan, and it was not blocked by my friends. Can you take screenshots of all his moments and show them to me? The friend didn't understand why, but he did it. There is so much strength in the world, there are so many rich people, one more me is not a problem. Soon I understood why my friend exclaimed like this. In another circle of friends of my brother, he made no secret of showing off. Sorry, my brother is 18 years old and bought a riverside house in full by his parents. The picture is a group chat record. Mom and Dad carefully chose a house and asked my brother what he thought. And with a big wave, they promised him that this house would be his coming-of-age gift. The funny thing is that it's a group chat of 3. Dad, Mom, and my brother. There is no me. At this moment, I suddenly realized that my parents' performance in front of me is not pretending to be poor. But it is a true expression from the heart. That rich and loving one, who can let the child who can't even take the college entrance examination go abroad for tourism and buy a riverside house in full, is their family of 3. And the 4-member family that belongs to me is just a wet cotton padded jacket in the cold winter. It's cold when you wear it, and it's also cold when you take it off. A better choice might be to ignore it. Tearing my face for me is of no benefit, it will only be a waste of effort in vain. But I have been enduring for so many years. What benefits can endurance bring to me? I spoke frankly in the group of 4 people. No money to give me as a living allowance, is it because the money is left for my brother to travel around the world? No money to pay for my tuition, is it because the money is left for my brother to buy a riverside house? Mom dodged the question and started crying and accusing me of believing outsiders rather than family. I was unmoved. Good brother, think before you post on the circle of friends. Fortunately, you are pretending to be poor, not really poor, otherwise people will think that Lu Qingzhou is not well in his later years, and after working hard for half his life, he doesn't even have 300 yuan in his pocket. My dad, Lu Qingzhou, was pretending to be dead. As soon as he heard what I said, he got angry instantly. Yes, I have money and I don't want to give it to you. What's the use of a girl reading so much? In the end, it's still the fate of serving others. It's better to get married early and earn a dowry for the family, which is still a bit of contribution. My brother just got choked by me, and he had to fight back across the Indian Ocean. Yes, sister, you know now, Mom and Dad are going to buy me a new house. You might as well get married early and give me a dowry to make a down payment. Ha! Ha! I looked at this family and saw their ugly faces without any pretense, and I sneered at the corner of my mouth. Whether the family is in negative income or not, I don't know, but I know your IQ and EQ are indeed negative. Fortunately, you have a good father, otherwise, people like you who try their best to get 200 points in the exam, I don't know how you will live. Unfortunately, the old man has nothing to be grateful for. He has finally trained a descendant, but it turns out to be a disabled person with intellectual disabilities. After venting my anger, I took screenshots of the chat records and then left the group and blocked them all at once. Out of sight, out of mind. I was thinking about whether to post these records to the owner group to let the neighbors see the excitement, or to post them on the internet to let them be criticized. Suddenly, a mechanical electronic sound rang in my ear. Congratulations on awakening the Popper system. I looked up alertly. There was no one in the dormitory. The voice told me that wealth has a magnetic field. Money will always flow to those with a rich heart, and my parents, although they have wealth, are dry inside. They are stingy with me and even make up lies, which is hard to accept. You can specify the object and bind the Popper system. I clenched my fist and nodded. This family likes to pretend to be poor, right? Then let them make a real play. After tearing my face with the family, my luck seems to have hit the bottom and rebounded. The tutor knew about my family situation and gave me a generous labor fee after completing the project. The process of finding a part-time job was also very smooth. Perhaps it is also related to the system saying that money will flow to those with a rich heart, and I was in a good mood, praising myself. A discordant voice interrupted my self-appreciation. I turned my head and saw the phone that kept singing, showing the contact person. TSK, I made a mistake. I forgot to block my mother's other phone card. I hesitated for a long time, but I still answered the call. I only heard my mother's hoarse voice, with a cry, "You, something happened." It was the time to be sleepy after lunch, but I was immediately refreshed when I heard this. Her anxious tone couldn't be faked. I softened my voice. "Mom, don't worry, tell me slowly. I will help if I can. Mom then calmed down, sobbing and telling me that she was too silly. She believed in someone else's health product pyramid scheme and spent a lot of money to buy a bunch of tablets, but in just 2 days, she put her brother into the hospital. What kind of health product is it? Mom was embarrassed and silent for a long time before she lowered her voice and said that it was something that could promote brain development. Even if I was prepared, I almost laughed out loud. It seems that the speaker has a heart, and the listener has a heart. My words that day probably hit someone's spine. You have a good relationship at school. Can you ask classmates and teachers to find out what to do? Mom said hesitantly. I looked embarrassed and said, "Mom, I am an engineering student, which is far from the law. But if you need it, I do have other ways to help you. Mom immediately got excited. I held back my laughter and said with difficulty, "Mom, I can help you laugh at you. You should go and supplement your brain with your brother." Dad's sudden angry voice exploded from the phone. I told you not to go to that evil seed, but you didn't listen. What good intentions can she have? The abuse that followed was isolated on the other end of the phone. I hung up the phone and carefully blocked all their contact information. Mom was cheated out of tens of thousands of yuan, and my brother was hospitalized for eating the unqualified product. This is really a double happiness. However, their family is rich and strong, and this little wind and waves can't shake the foundation. The gears of fate have started to turn. I look forward to it. The Liu family received a bad news and a good news today. The bad news is that the treasure of the parents, Yaozu, is going to be discharged. The good news is that he was hospitalized again. After the results came out, my brother was busy reflecting on himself and urging himself, and then he went to Australia for a 7-day tour. Finally, he found a chance to get together with his friends, and he got into trouble when he got together. After a few drinks, a group of young men with high blood got drunk. I don't know where his good friend heard the real reason for his hospitalization, and he was so drunk that he didn't close his mouth and talked about it as a joke at the bar. Who knew that he stepped on the prince's mind? Being ridiculed by his sister for low IQ, and really being low IQ enough to eat the 10-whole great supplement pill bought by his mother and was hospitalized. Is it funny? No, it's not funny. So this prince, who is used to being a coward, became a male, and the male under the influence of alcohol, bravely fighting for his dignity. He picked up the bench and started fighting. Then, in the chaos, he was drenched by the spilled hot pot soup. However, he didn't suffer a skin disaster for nothing. In the chaos, the iron bench he raised high just landed on the head of a passerby who came to persuade. He knocked someone out on the spot. 2 ambulances took people to the hospital. There was a long row of people sitting outside the clinic, some looking unhappy, and some knowing they were at fault. Mom and Dad rushed to the hospital, and as soon as they entered the hospital, they cried and wailed, "My son, my poor son." Before the voice fell, a ruthless slap fell heavily on my dad's old face. He was confused and hadn't reacted yet, and his collar was fiercely grabbed. "Are you the father of that beast? You have a sin for raising such a scum. What are you doing in the hospital? Who let you fight?" The tall and strong uncle was persuaded away, but his fierce gaze was still staring at Dad. Dad swallowed a mouthful of water, a little frightened, but still asked with a stiff neck, "Who are you? Why do you hit me?" Your son put my son into the hospital, and you hit you." "No way, our family is such a good kid." That uncle turned his head and just snorted coldly, and said to the police. "The poor child was hit on the top of his head by an iron bench leg and sewed a total of 8 stitches. And my brother's situation is not very optimistic. The iron pot was turned off when it was spilled, and the soup was not boiling. However, it happened to be a spicy pot. Just cleaning the wound is enough for him to drink. The capsaicin continuously stimulated the skin that was scalded by my brother, and he was in pain. The pain on the son's body is the pain in the parent's heart. Seeing his son's unbearable appearance, Dad actually summoned up the courage to straighten his neck and said, "Your son hurt your son, and your son didn't hurt my son like this." The uncle sneered and didn't speak. Seeing this, Dad wanted to go forward to discuss, but the young man who teased my brother that day grabbed his clothes. This instigator has completely lost the passion of being driven by alcohol, and he hangs his head, as if he is sober. "Uncle, forget it. It was Shirkong who started it first, and others just came to persuade." Then the uncle said coldly, "Did you hear? Your son is provoking trouble and fighting, waiting to be in jail." Dad's face turned gray inch by inch, and his anger was gone. Of course, he knew what it meant to call the police. How could he let his precious Yaozu carry a dirty case? He changed his attitude and asked in a low voice if the other party could settle privately. The answer was a firm refusal. Dad panicked and started to ask how much compensation could be made without calling the police. Under the scrutiny of that man, Dad's forehead was sweating, and he gradually raised the price. Finally, when a number that made Dad's heart bleed was shouted out, the man nodded and accepted it. I turned off the screen that the system played for me. It's reasonable to spend money to avoid disaster. Between losing a fortune and leaving a stain on his precious son, he made a wise choice. I hope he can always be wise. Money may be able to settle human disasters, but it can't heal the pain. My brother's wound was infected, and he had a high fever and was in a coma for a few days. When he opened his eyes, he saw the thick gauze wrapped all over his body. The scalding hot oil poured on his arm, thigh, and the whole sole of his foot at that time, causing a deep second-degree burn. Fierce blisters spread all over his skin, and a slight friction with the sheet caused heart-wrenching pain. Worse than the pain is his own psychological suggestion. He locked himself in the ward and looked up the information, and all he saw were the ferocious burn cases and the terrifying introduction of sequelae. Am I going to become like this? He trembled and asked his mother, who was crying red eyes, and his father, who was silent beside him. No, we will find the best doctor for you and use the most expensive medicine. Mom hugged her brother in her arms with heartache, a touching scene. I coldly watched the projection on the screen, suddenly recalling a scene from my senior year of high school. At that time, I was under a lot of study pressure and got shingles. The burning pain made it almost impossible for me to concentrate on studying, so I took leave and made an appointment to go to the hospital. The general registration fee was 5.5 yuan, and the doctor pushed his glasses up his nose bridge and handed the printed prescription to my mother. I remember very clearly. The registration fee was 5.5 yuan, and the ointment prescribed by the doctor was 19.8 yuan. And when my mother saw the prescription, she pursed her lips. The doctor just told her that shingles are not a big problem, it may be just caused by too much pressure. As long as you apply the medicine on time, it will get better quickly. But she cut to the chase, pointing at my spine and said, "How can you, a girl, get such a delicate disease? Everyone else is under pressure, but no one else has a problem, just you." Her scolding fell like raindrops, soaking me thoroughly. And she stood under the eaves, blaming me for getting sick, blaming me for being an ungrateful child. Alas, this ointment is really expensive, it can buy a pound of pork. In the end, we passed by the pharmacy and didn't buy the medicine. Because in fact, even if you don't do anything about it, it's not a big problem, shingles can heal by themselves. But Mom, the pork you saved was bought at the cost of several nights of being tortured and unable to sleep. Because I couldn't concentrate, my grades dropped in the next mock exam. And Dad looked at me coldly, attributing my decline to the fact that girls with braids are not strong enough, no matter how good the grades were before. How ridiculous. Now, Mom and Dad are around my brother, full of concern. Not at all distressed that the hundreds of ointments can buy how many pounds of pork. I unconsciously stroked the back of my neck. The place where shingles had climbed. I recovered very well, and now that piece of skin is intact, so Mom and Dad even scolded me once after I recovered. Saying that such a minor problem doesn't even need to go to the hospital at all. But only I know. Some of the pain leaves scars, not invisible places. I blocked all the family's contact information. So when my dad contacted me through the school, I was not surprised. His voice was suppressed with anger, and he scolded me without any reason. After calming down a bit, he stretched his face and ordered me to go home quickly. "Your brother is so injured, as a sister, you don't care at all, you're a white-eyed wolf. If I knew this, I should have smashed you on the ground when you were born." I listened to his meaningless dirty words, innocently said, "I also want to go home to see my brother, but I don't have money to buy a ticket to go home." Dad was angry, but he still reluctantly transferred the first account to me in more than a year. 300 yuan, just enough for a one-way ticket. But I didn't know, it turned out that it was not because he was stingy this time. When I got off the high-speed train, I saw my dad standing at the exit with a black face from a distance. It's really rare, this time someone came to pick me up. Instead of asking me to take the subway home to save on fuel. I'm not planning to stay at home for a long time, just carrying a bag. Dad saw me and snorted coldly, not saying a word, just walking in front to lead me to the parking lot. I followed him step by step, also silent. Sitting in the back seat of the car, I was bored looking out of the window, but suddenly my heart moved. Although I haven't been home for a year, I remember clearly. This is not the way home. I frowned and asked Dad, "Are we going directly to the hospital to see Lu Shikong?" Dad didn't speak, but his hand holding the steering wheel suddenly tightened. I know, he is suppressing his anger. Not getting an answer, the silent car gradually made the atmosphere a bit suffocating. I opened the map positioning. If I remember correctly, in the screencast given to me by the system, I saw that my brother was admitted to the first hospital. But now, I'm not on the way to the first hospital either. My heart ached, and my gaze met Dad's gloomy eyes in the rearview mirror, and a creepy thought came to my mind. I immediately sent a message to my friend and set up location sharing. After confirming safety, "I'll call you, if you haven't received my call, call the police for me." The scenery is flying by, and the houses on the side of the road gradually become lower and lower. I judged that I should be close to the suburbs of the city, and Dad stopped the car. Almost dragging, he pulled me out of the back seat and pressed me into a restaurant. Through the transparent glass, I could see that there was only one table of people in the restaurant. A man in his 30s or 40s with a big beer belly was squinting his eyes and looking at me like a product. Seeing us getting closer, he stood up from his seat and walked out of the restaurant. Dad's arm on my shoulder suddenly exerted force, as if he was escorting a prisoner to the execution ground. I looked at him in horror, and a glint flashed in his eyes, with a mirthless smile. There's no way out, this is the fate of a girl. Almost in an instant, I recalled what Dad had said. What's the use of having a high degree, you still have to be a wife and mother. It's better to get married early and earn a dowry for the family. It turns out that those words were not said casually. But there was a premeditated plan. The alarm bells in my heart rang, and I kicked Dad's knee hard with the back of my foot. He was unprepared and was bent over by the sharp pain, and I pushed him away and ran. Behind me came Dad's angry shouting, "This bitch, don't let her run." The heavy breathing and the feeling of the soles of my feet hitting the ground were intertwined. The scorching sun was dizzying. The hot sun was like a sharp blade piercing into my lungs and chest. But I can't stop, I dare not stop. I don't know where I'm running, I'm just running desperately. And behind me, it's my father who is not giving up. I don't know if the sweat on my forehead has flowed into my eyes. I ran and ran, tears streaming down my face. My strength is gradually consumed, and I'm getting more and more tired. I forced myself to cross the road and ran to the opposite sidewalk, but I was tripped by a protruding manhole cover and fell to the ground. I was too weak to get up for a while. The sharp and harsh sound of the car horn was long, and I curled my fingers and looked back. At that moment, the pain of the scraped knee and the broken fingernail was overshadowed by the great panic. A speeding car brushed past me and hit my dad, who was chasing me a few meters behind. His scolding voice was covered up, and his ferocious expression was fixed at that moment. Then, like a bird, he fluttered his wings and fell into a pool of blood. The pain came to me later. The joints were scraped, and it was excruciating to move. I stared blankly at where my dad had collapsed, but when my line of sight collided with the middle-aged man across the street, I suddenly became alert. The man who was sitting in the restaurant also chased out. A great fear instantly invaded my body, and I got up from the ground, limping to the road. With trembling hands, I stopped a taxi, and I panted to the driver, "Master, go to the East Station." The man who was accelerating towards me saw that he couldn't catch up and stopped angrily, cursing something. It wasn't until the taxi started that I truly felt. I was safe. Calmed down from the state of panic, I slightly closed my eyes. Will he die? I suddenly hesitated. Taking away Dad's life was not what I wanted. To be fair, I have no hope for this hypocritical and broken home, and the so-called affection. If their repeated attitudes of division towards me and my brother are a dull knife on my heart, slowly torturing me. Then what happened today is like a nightmare, the last knife that makes me completely heartbroken. They blame me for not caring about my brother as a sister. They tricked me into going home. What they wanted to do was to sell my life to make a profit for themselves. I don't believe they knew nothing about it. But even so, my original intention of binding the system was to let them feel my embarrassment and pain. To make up for the harm they caused to me. I never wanted anyone to disappear completely. The system seemed to sense my voice, and the indifferent mechanical sound was a little comforting. Don't worry, this system only seeks wealth, not lives. Hearing this, I finally let out a long breath that was trapped in my chest by inexplicable emotions. I didn't want to kill them. But they never considered whether they would kill me. This family that doesn't spit out bones when eating people. I just want to escape as soon as possible and never have anything to do with them again. I returned to school. Then I studied hard. I didn't dare to slack off for a moment. I have never understood as much as I do now that for some less fortunate people, relatives do not exist. Any slight negligence will be met with ruthless betrayal. In their eyes, I can be a loss-making product, a commodity, a chip. I am not a member that can be accommodated in their most stable and firm triangle. So I can only desperately hold on to the few things I have and climb up. Climb to a place where no one can grab my pants legs and pull me down. I will never stop for the so-called family again. When I heard the news from home again, it was when my father was out of the danger period. The surgery was very successful, his vital signs had disappeared for a while, but he survived tenaciously. The doctor said it was almost a miracle. The only pity is that he can't wake up. Lying motionless in the intensive care unit, connected to the heartbeat stimulator by expensive equipment, he has no response to my mother's wailing. In less than 2 months, the world has turned upside down. Mom almost turned white overnight. The bad news spread to my brother's ears. His reaction was even more intense than my mother's. What? Staying in the intensive care unit, how much money does it burn? It's really funny to say. The blood in the veins of this family is the same. Before, Mom and Dad disliked me for being sick and spending money. Now, the one who is disliked has become myself. But my brother's dislike is unreasonable. Even if he is the son of the old Liu family, the money is not really his now. Even if it is an inheritance, it has to wait until Dad dies. But he obviously doesn't understand this truth, and he has too much possessiveness for things that don't belong to him. He made a big fuss, and at this moment, he completely lost his sickly appearance when he was lying in the hospital bed. Staying there costs thousands a day. What about my house? What about my coming-of-age gift? Mom was already in a lot of pain, and when she saw her favorite child making a fuss, she could only appease him powerlessly. As long as there is hope, we can't give up. Mom will buy you the shoes you want, okay? I don't know which sentence ignited his anger, and he became more anxious. What about my house? Is there no hope for my house? You promised me. You promised me. My brother slapped the door of the intensive care unit angrily. Bang! A ruthless slap fell heavily on his left face, stopping his voice. He couldn't believe it, covering his face with his hand, and couldn't believe that his mother, who loved him the most, would slap him. And the look in my mother's eyes was tired and disappointed. She finally realized at this moment. The son she cherished in her heart is despicable in essence. Dad fell down, and all the burdens of the family fell on Mom. She had no time to take care of me. Or perhaps in contrast to my brother, she suddenly had a trace of guilt for the daughter who was treated as if she were nothing by them. But it has nothing to do with me. I only know that I am about to get through. In the past year, I successfully obtained my favorite. I can smoothly join the job as soon as I get my degree certificate. And at home, my mother is busy making a living, and my brother took a leave of absence from school on the pretext of being injured, lying at home doing nothing but eating. The expensive burn medicine didn't save his skin. The ferocious red marks spread on his arms and thighs. It looks like a broken doll that has been sewn up again. Perhaps the physiological disease will eventually lead to a psychological disease. My brother seems to be crazy. Mom called me on an unfamiliar number. Hearing the voice I hadn't heard for nearly a year, I even felt strange. She told me that Dad woke up. But there was no joy in her tone. I can predict the family's financial situation without asking. Dad is lying in the ward, maintaining vital signs with equipment, and slowly eating away at the family's savings. It's already on the verge of exhaustion. And at this critical moment, the husband finally woke up, which should be a great joy. After listening to my mother's words, I felt cold all over. The family's savings can't support the subsequent treatment, but Dad still has no sign of waking up. Originally, my mother was going to give up the treatment, but my brother took the lead. When the hospital called, my mother was working overtime at the unit. My brother entered the ward under the guise of visiting the sick, but after standing silently for a while, he reached out and pulled out the equipment. The doctor was standing outside the ward, preparing to make a round. When he pushed open the door, the plug of the instrument was still firmly in his hand. And Dad, it was at this moment that he opened his eyes. I don't understand what my mother's purpose is to tell me this satirical family ugliness as an outsider. Perhaps she just suddenly remembered that she still has a daughter. Remember that the daughter is the little cotton-padded jacket that parents are close to. Then, like a drowning person grabbing a float, she tried to hold on tightly to me. But I just shrugged. Mom, I know you also contributed to the matter of trying to sell me to an old man. What's the point of turning to me now? As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I suddenly thought. She might have calculated that I was about to graduate, and thought that the fat sheep was ripe and it was time to slaughter. Sure enough, after my mother choked for a while, she said, "Your father didn't support you to study at first, but I insisted on letting you continue studying. I thought you were promising and could have a good future. Now the family is in financial difficulty, and we can't even afford to eat. Can you lend some money to the family? Just consider it as a loan from Mom." It seems that the blood in my body solidified in an instant. She has said this to me more than once over the years. Said the family was poor, so poor that we couldn't make ends meet, and asked me to understand them. Yes, I was considerate, I understood, and I endured silently. But the fact is that when I wore out the soles of my shoes, my brother was wearing new sneakers and smiling brilliantly. When I made do with steamed buns with cold water for 3 meals, my brother was on the other side of the planet, holding Australian lobsters and showing off. They wove a huge illusion of poverty, and I was the only one trapped in it from beginning to end. Now, they are reaping what they have sown, and I am about to usher in my bright future. But they dare to come to me and sell their misfortune. I haven't shared any sweetness with them for more than 20 years. Now, no one can force me to share the hardships with them. I sneered. I'm sorry, Mom, I'm just a student, where can I get money? Her voice stagnated for a moment, then suddenly became sharp. Lusiki, I really raised you for nothing. Didn't you find a great job? How can you have no money? We have raised you for so many years, and you don't think about helping the family when you make money. You are an ungrateful child. I listened to her words that changed 180 degrees, and I laughed to myself. Coaxing and showing weakness are just sugar-coated tantrums. Once the goal is not achieved, she will instantly get angry and put the dirty essence on the table. How hateful. She played the image of a loving mother in front of me for more than 20 years, and it finally broke suddenly. But their despicable means are far from over. Since I got up in the morning, my eyelids have been jumping. I couldn't suppress the palpitations. In the afternoon, when I was rehearsing the graduation defense in the classroom, the door was suddenly pushed open. It was my mother and father with a fierce look, pulling my brother. Mom was crying and making a scene, pointing at my nose and scolding me for being unfilial. Dad stood at the door and shouted loudly. What kind of school is this, teaching children who abandon their families? Uninformed students were attracted by the noise and saw the ferocious scars on my brother's body, and they began to whisper. Someone tried to persuade them but failed, and the police were called. When the police came, my mother was crying and holding the police officer's sleeve, asking the police to help them. I raised her to this age, but she turned her face and didn't recognize people. Then she stretched her voice and yelled at me. You only have us as family, are you going to watch us starve to death? As the public opinion grew, I pushed my glasses up my nose. Fortunately, I had all the evidence I had sorted out stored in my computer. I connected to the classroom projector and displayed all the evidence of their suppression over the years on the blackboard. Since everyone is here, let's let everyone see who would say to their daughter, if you can't afford it, don't study, and go home early to get married. Who would say they have no money to support their daughter's education, yet send their son abroad for a good time. Once the text and images were shown, the onlookers became more lively, and there were all kinds of comments. It's really embarrassing to say they worked hard to support their daughter's education when they didn't even pay for her tuition and living expenses. I know that senior, she used scholarships and grants to pay for her tuition, and she didn't spend her family's money at all. My God, even tigers don't eat their children, and in this day and age, there are still people who want to sell their daughters for a dowry, especially such an excellent daughter. My mother was left without face, and my father's temper gradually diminished. Just as the public was pointing fingers, Lu Shikong, who was pulled by his parents as a flag, couldn't bear it anymore. Aren't you ashamed yet? If we starve, we starve. I don't even want to live. He is 18 years old. At the age when he should be full of vitality. But he didn't even continue his studies. His body is covered with burn scars. And at this moment, he wiped the tears from his face, pushed through the crowd and ran out. After the police mediation, my parents reluctantly took my brother home. They didn't bother me anymore. The disturbance they caused at school didn't affect my reputation. On the contrary, it added a bit of admiration to others' eyes for me. It's just that they really puzzled me. What is the unbreakable bond of clan and blood? It can make them reconcile with their son who is willing to do harm to his father, but they don't give their daughter a good look. But this small mystery didn't take up too much of my energy, because my graduation defense passed smoothly. And a new chapter of my life is about to begin. On the day I heard about the situation of the Lu family, I was celebrating for a promotion and a raise. During the time Dad was lying in the ward, his position was quietly replaced. He received a compensation, but the fear of unemployment made it hard for him to adapt. He first tried to return to the workplace, but the midlife crisis he had luckily avoided finally hit him at this moment. The family barely got by with Mom's income and compensation, but the huge gap soon began to invade Dad's nerves. He began to point his only harsh spearhead at his own wife and son. Then the verbal violence escalated into physical violence. The sound of pots and pans breaking and the bruises and swelling on each other's bodies kept increasing. A virus called poverty makes couples sad swept through the family. My brother no longer had the once arrogant appearance. The boiling hot pot extinguished his pride in his appearance. And the riverside mansion he dreamed of also shattered at the slightest touch. Now he has no material foundation to rely on, and no professional skills to rely on. He dare not socialize with people, and even dare not step out of the house. The only thing he can do is to huddle in the corner of the restaurant, watching his parents fight over whether the garlic cloves were half a cent more expensive, and smashing each other's heads against the wall. Or occasionally, like the day he raised the stool and accidentally hurt an innocent passerby. Being hit in the head by the pots and pans they threw. Perhaps he was finally fed up with all this mess. Perhaps he was completely hopeless about the future. On a quiet night. When Dad and Mom were exhausted from arguing and fell asleep. Lu Shikong quietly opened the door and climbed to the top of the building. The low-rise neighbors were awakened by a dull thud, and the dull night was broken by the lights. Then screams, waking up the parents who were sleeping in the same bed. They vaguely heard someone shouting that someone had jumped off the building, someone had jumped off the building. But it was not until the morning that they found out their son was dead. The triangle is always the most stable shape. After a painful cry, they shook hands for some reason, and then realized the importance of family. So they finally remembered that they had a daughter again. With a new tragedy, they begged for my forgiveness. This time, perhaps realizing that they were really old and helpless, they could only rely on me. They put down all their dignity with full sincerity. When my brother's body was still cold, they invited me to take his place and rejoin the stable family of 3. I didn't even listen to their words before hanging up the phone. And this rickety home finally collapsed. After the brief revival of the phone call, the two had an unprecedented fierce quarrel. Blaming each other for being too unkind to their daughter, which led to today's tragedy. Finally, they ended up in divorce. Cutting off all the false shackles, my life went very smoothly, and I had more time and energy to devote to my ideals. At this moment, I am sitting in a bright office. There is a thank you letter written in beautiful handwriting on the side. Teacher Lu, you are my role model. Without your story to inspire me, I might still be stuck in the mud. Now, I am working hard to become someone like you. I have organized all the unfair treatment, suppression, and criticism I encountered in my growth process. Inspired many girls in the same situation as me. Let them understand that even if the handcard is not good, everyone's life can have its own brilliance. I want to light a lamp for those children who are searching in the dark. Let them understand that the wet cotton padded jacket of affection is not indispensable. When you stand on a big enough stage and have a big enough market. What you see will be a dazzling array of cotton padded jackets in various styles. I will continue to fight, without regrets,